Welcome back to Two Steps Forward, our daily Bible study. Thanks for joining us today for episode number 96, Exodus 3. Again, still on location in northern Michigan, on vacation. So thanks again for joining us. We are, again, up to Exodus 3. Make sure that you read through your copy at home. Here is my personal paraphrase for Exodus 3. This is a big chapter in the book. The one where Moses encounters God in the burning bush. Moses tended the flocks of Jethro, his father-in-law. He found that on the side of Mount Horeb, again also called Mount Sinai, there was a bush burning with fire, but curiously, it was not getting burned up. The angel of the Lord appeared to him in the flames of the bush, and God called to him from within the bush, and Moses said, "Here I am." God made Moses take off his sandals because this was holy ground. God announced that he was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Moses hid his face in fear. The Lord said he saw and heard the cries of his people in Egypt, and God said he is sending Moses to Pharaoh to get him to let his people go and bring the Israelites to a good land. Moses immediately questioned who he was, that he should be the one delivering the Israelites from Pharaoh. But God assured him it would happen, and the final proof would be that he would worship God at this very mountain, Mount Horeb, Sinai. Moses asked what he should say to the Israelites, and God said, "Tell them that I am sent you." That's this proper name for God, which we'll get into. God said he will be remembered generation after generation by this name, Yahweh, or I am. Moses is to explain this to the elders of Israel for 3 days, offering sacrifices in the wilderness. But Pharaoh will not let them go easily. God will perform wonders before Pharaoh to let him know what's happening. And the Israelites will not go empty-handed, but the Egyptians will give them prized possessions, gold, silver, and clothes when they leave. That's a summary for Exodus 3. Any initial reactions?
No, I like it when God says, "I am who I am." Like, it's interesting that all the other like the Egyptian gods, or even like when you get to the Greeks, the Greek gods all had like different names.
Yeah.
God almost says like, "I don't have a name. Like, this just is who I am."
It would be too limiting to give
Yeah.
me a name. In fact, he doesn't even. It from a tense standpoint, it's present tense. He's not the God of the past. He's not the God of the future. He just always is, and that's perfectly consistent with if God created the universe and he exists outside time and space, then he just always is, apart from anything circumstantial in the universe. So it gets to the changelessness and timelessness and omnipresence of God. It really is like the ultimate name. It's kind of like
It's the coolest thing you could say at that moment.
it's the coolest thing, which is not why he just wanted to deliver the right line. But yeah, there's not anything else would be unnecessarily limiting.
I also think it's interesting. So when the Bible talks about like God experiencing emotions, I think it might actually be in the next chapter though. He says he gets angry with Moses, but even here he seems a little, irritated through this, right? Like, I am who I am.
Yeah, there is a reaction from him towards unbelief. And Moses is he's repeatedly making excuses when he's trying to send him. He's scared, but he's not like courageously going along for the ride or anything like that. There is reactions to God, and we're going to see also God when he eventually will move through the book of Exodus. And as you talk about God's emotions, one of the reasons why God doesn't allow images to be created of him is because if you think about a picture of somebody, supposedly this is one of the reasons why, at least I'm pretty sure I read this, that like, for instance, Renaissance paintings, the characters had no emotion. It's because it would give away too much of their personality type if they, like, so we tell people to smile because, modern Western civilization has a little bit of an idol of comfort, pleasure, and happiness. And therefore, the image we want to project of ourselves is being happy all the time. So even though in that moment, most people, when they're having a family picture and they're trying to, are not very, like, most people don't find that enjoyable. But we're going to create the illusion of it because that's the God we serve, and that's what we're aiming at. But at that time, they wouldn't allow people to project the emotions. And God says, it would be, if you put God with a smile on his face, he would be this happy, placating, dismissive God. If you put God with, a furrowed brow, he would be constantly vengeful, angry, whatever. And he says, you can't limit me to one emotion, one name, one place, that kind of thing.
Additionally, he probably trims his beard more often than we think, and he's tired of getting pictured with unkempt beard.
There's a great deal of scholarly debate regarding the length of God's beard. So, yes, or whether he has facial hair. So, but yes, that he's always picked it that way. I think it's because of the wisdom thing, like the agedness and a beard. Like you have to be fully.
But he's not like grandfather time.
No, it's a unnecessary and unhelpful cliche.
Yeah, when we get to heaven, okay, I'm not sure God will look like an actual person. I know Jesus has his body. I'm not sure God will look like a person, but if he did, he'd probably be younger than people think. Like, why would he have wrinkles?
He's not the placating God handing out Werther's originals with his kids on his great grandkids on his lap in heaven. No. Yeah, he's I don't think there will be that kind of imagery when it comes to the Father.
When it says they walked with God in the garden, he had to have some sort of or was it just a presence they felt?
So yeah, again, the technical name is an anthropomorphism, which is when we attribute human attributes to the divine, because how else are you going to describe God moving with the humans in the garden?
So maybe he wasn't actually walking.
Does walk with God mean God actually had 2 feet on the ground?
Well, but when I see those footprints in the sand, I know he's carrying me.
Yes.
So
yeah,
that could be Jesus, though. Yes.
We do all sorts of things to try to capture the nature of God. And for that matter, God does certain things to try to indicate to us his nature in human terms that we can understand. And one of them we're going to see here is our first devotional thought. The Lord is a consuming but non-destructive fire. Yeah, there are other places where God is depicted as a consuming fire too, but in this particular instance, notice the thing that catches Moses' eye is the fact that he sees a bush burning, but specifically it says it's not burning up. That's real interesting because fire has destructive power, but why wouldn't it be, clearly this would be a dry bush out in the middle of the desert. Why is it not getting consumed up by this fire? Now, further interesting is God throughout the Bible, and especially in the Old Testament, depicts himself as this presence of a fire that is like consuming but non-destructive. So he appears to the patriarch Abraham in the fire pot. Remember when Abraham has that vision in Genesis? He appears when he's making a covenant with him. He appears to Moses here in the burning bush. He appears to the Israelites on the top of Mount Sinai as this like crazy consuming fire. He appears to the Israelites wandering through the wilderness as a pillar of fire by night and smoke by day. So like this constant idea that he's there and he has this presence of a fire. Why exactly is that? I think to some extent what it means is God is purifying, God is refining, and yet what we see is God is non-destructive. Now, in our minds, it's always one or the other. Either it's consumed by fire and getting destroyed, or not touched by fire. But the Bible, and I think of, for instance, what the Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians, like people passing through fire, being saved. There's this refining, galvanizing aspect to fire too, and I think that's all part of it. God is constantly seeking to refine us, who are sinful people. We talked about this, I think, yesterday. Justification, sanctification, glorification. We are already saved as a status, but he is refining us and sanctifying us, and that's a passing through of fire without ultimately hurting us.
Yeah, and I liked the connection between, justification, sanctification, glorification. That experience kind of embodies who God is, like he was, that's your justification, that's already done. He was, he is, that's your sanctification, and he's also yet to come, and that's like your glorification.
Yep. Yes, it gives the various states there too. Yeah. Now, eventually, God, interestingly enough, that shapes our understanding of. This is almost always part of my message on Christmas, because God, who was this consuming fire in the Old Testament, then wraps himself in human flesh. And what does he do? He goes to the cross. In other words, he becomes so undangerous that he's a baby that you can hold in your arms, a timeless omniscient, omnipresent God any human can hold in their arms, and yet that human goes to a cross and goes through, in essence, the fires of hell, which is further proof that he's not out to hurt us. He is there to refine us and galvanize us, which fire can do, but he isn't there to hurt us because he got hurt in our place for us. All right, devotional thought number 2, unless you had anything you wanted to add to that.
Why does it say the angel of the Lord appeared to him?
Yeah, this is a good time to bring it up. We have so much, it's almost hard, you almost have to deprogram the modern Western person's mind of angel before you can talk about God as the angel of the Lord.
Well, when I think of the angel of the Lord, I think of Jesus.
Right.
So is this Jesus appearing to him?
So Jesus
isn't I am, is he?
So one of the so sometimes people will say, did Jesus ever really claim to be God? And one of the most interesting things is there's several different ways in which he does claim to be God in the New Testament, but in the Gospels, when he's standing before the Sanhedrin and they say, are you God's son? Uh-huh. And he specifically says, Yahweh, I am. Uh-huh. At that point, the high priest and the Sanhedrin tear their clothes. Why? Not because he just said he's the son of God, but because he said, I am. And specifically at that moment, what he's doing is he's identifying with the who is in this burning bush at this moment. And so very clearly, is this, the pre-incarnate Christ, the angel of the Lord? It's hard to, anytime you're parsing down the Trinity.
Right, yeah.
It's a little...
I know they're the same, they are all in the same person, but...
But Jesus is somehow claiming equivalency with the God who's in the burning bush here.
But I still think of it as different versions of the same person.
Yeah.
Yep. Jesus has a body, God doesn't, and the Holy Spirit's a dove.
Yeah, it's again, there's certain things that you can say and certain things that you can't say, and it doesn't put him into a tidy category because as a divine God, we have no business putting him into our finite categories. All right, so second devotional thought is God as I am. And we already touched on this a little bit. It's the Hebrew word we translate it as Yahweh. And in fact, there are some who say you have to call him Jehovah or Yahweh or whatever, which is a little ridiculous because we don't even know the original Hebrew did not have vowel forms. Those were added by a group called the Masoretes about 1000 AD. So in other words, we don't know what these words, they only had consonants. We don't know what those original words sounded like. And yet we know what the verb is. It's the verb present tense for to be. It means that God, again, it's the coolest name because it means God is the source of all life. Life comes from him, life is found in him, and to move away from him is essentially to move towards death. It's present tense as a source of constancy. And, we experience time in a linear fashion, but God always was, always is, and always will be because he exists outside time and space. And as I mentioned, Jesus identifies as this I am God when he's asked questions by the Jewish leaders, who are you? Are you the Messiah? Are you God's son? And he very clearly says, yes, I am. This is... There a similar phrase in the New Testament is at the beginning of John's Gospel when he uses the term logos. And you've probably heard of this before too, but John's Gospel starts out, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Now, the word that's translated as just word there is logos. It's the Greek word logos, but the English term word doesn't do it justice because the logos was a very important concept to Greek philosophy at the time. It was the singular base operating principle of the entire universe. So it's the thing that made every other thing go around. It's kind of like scientists today have, Einstein was obsessed with finding a one equation that exists underneath all the other equations that makes sense of how the universe looks the way it does. That is not a new thing. Philosophers for years were trying to figure out what is the underlying principle of the universe. And John, tapping into Greek philosophy, says the logos that you're looking for, the meaning of life that you're looking for is found in, it's not a thing, it's not an ideology, it's not a concept, it's a person, the Son of God, Jesus Christ. So you're looking very cold. Are you okay?
Oh, it's kind of windy and chilly, and I'm beginning to remember that living in the country is kind of like glamping. It's kind of like...
What is glamping?
glamorous camping. It's just one click above camping. You're outside a lot. Your food, most of your food is cooked over a fire. It can be cold. The windows are always open.
You're loving it, is what you're telling me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like you really like John for some reason. Do you like John or Paul more?
My brother, the name, or the gospel?
The person who wrote the gospel.
The person who wrote the gospel. John's gospel it's not one of the quote-unquote synoptics. Mm-hmm. So the three, Matthew, Mark, Luke, cover the same basic of events from various perspectives. John's gospel has a lot of those same important events, but it's also known as the most like philosophical of the gospels, and therefore.
I feel like you're always talking well of John. Though. You're like, John was the youngest. He was the best looking.
What I like, I didn't realize that I had that obsession, but he, in some respects. So, like, the first Greek that I ever translated was John, John's Gospel. The reason for that is the Greek of it is fairly simple, but the concepts attached to it are the most philosophical and the most, like, in-depth. So, Jesus' bread of life discourse, the amount of detail in Jesus' high priestly prayer that none of the other Gospels give us. There's so much, like, whoa, what exactly does that mean in John's Gospel?
You like that?
There's a depth to it that... There's depth to all of it, but John's Gospel is, if you ask most scholars which of them is conceptually the deepest, it's John's Gospel.
Maybe we'll do John next.
Maybe we will. But, yes, John is tapping in the logos concept that John reverts to repeatedly, or references on a number of occasions. It's the same kind of all-encompassing, underlying principle of life, the God who is, I am. And it's infinitely deep. Third devotional thought is, we're just going to call it Sanctified Plunder. And I think it's kind of interesting because God says, yeah, you're going to go and you're just going to completely take all the money and finances from the Egyptians. Mm-hmm. And what I want you to think about here is the Israelites have been enslaved for 400 years. Mm-hmm. And so it sounds like God is ordering the Israelites to steal from the Egyptians. You know, their gold, their silver, their clothes. You're going to come out with arms full and carts full out of Egypt with these things. But think this through. Does it really belong to the Egyptians? In other words, where did Egypt's wealth ultimately come from? Like, in a general way, of course, you can say God, but remember back to when they rose to real significant prominence as a dominating nation in the world. It was under Joseph. Remember, because there's a global famine. God, through Joseph, equips them, positions them to be the main supplier of food around the world. Mm-hmm. Everybody's coming to get, and then they have so much food and so much wealth that it's like uncountable and incalculable. And so Egypt's wealth is contributed to Joseph. Not only that, the other factor is essentially the Egyptians have continued to build incredible structures and harvest their lands on the backs of whom? The free labor force that they've been enslaving for the past 400 years, the Israelites. So tell me, like, the Israelites didn't earn this money, from God. It's God's gift to them, but it's the Israelites' money is my point.
It's actually a really relevant, issue that's happening again today.
How so?
So I told you, I listened to this podcast. It was a black woman, and she was saying, yes, slavery has ended. 50 years ago, or would you say more than that?
Slavery?
Yeah. Okay, 150. I don't know.
Yeah, 150. You're talking about the different laws.
Right, but it was kind of a slow.
Yes.
Even though it was slowly. It slowly happened. But she was saying, okay, so slavery's ended. Let's say you've been playing Monopoly for 50 years. All the white people are playing Monopoly. And then 50 years ago, you said to black people, okay, you were equal. Now you can also play. Yeah. She was like, there's nothing left. Everything is bought up already. Right. Because you bought it, and yes, you had this...
We didn't start playing at the same time. Don't deny what you've been afforded up until this point.
There's only so much. So you earned all of it with the help of slaves at one point. Yes. And now you're saying, well, you can take what's left. Well, there is nothing left. You have to give up something for us to have anything. Yeah. And she's also saying, but that was ours to begin with because your ancestors made what they have on the backs of slaves. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting. Now, when you parse it down into, okay, so whose ancestors did what? So if I'm if I am a third generation, of German descent here, my ancestors didn't have any slaves kind of thing. And so it's very difficult to figure out, but conceptually you get the idea.
Yeah.
When people talk about the redistribution of wealth today based on oppression from a century and a half ago, and plus, just understand God's doing the exact same thing with the Israelites right here. He's saying what you guys earned on the backs of my people for 400 years, that really belongs to them. And he's reallocating it. Now, to what degree can we have government do that? That's a huge debate and is a hugely political thing. I don't know if I totally want to get into it here, but the point is, it's not unprecedented by God.
Yeah.
So for a white person today to say, I didn't have any slaves and I didn't do whatever, and I didn't, just understand the Egyptians of that day, they were getting their quote unquote money taken from them and redistributed to God's people. Now, personally, I do think that God in time has a way of doing that on his own.
Yeah.
So that I think there is going to be or would be some wealth transmission. If somebody has been oppressed, socially oppressed, God himself will intervene and find a way to make it happen long term. I think at the very least, come Judgment Day, at the end of time, God will right all the wrongs.
Yeah.
But
okay, so yes, just so I don't look like an idiot, 150 years ago, whatever. But it was segregation.
Yes.
Everything wasn't equal.
Correct.
At that moment.
There's
50 years ago there was.
Yes. I think
there were segregated schools and
any narrative that says that there was equality as quick as 150 years ago is preposterous, because yes, there's literally legal segregation within the past 50 years. So
I saw this comic. I don't think it's to make you laugh. It's to make you think. Is that called satire? I don't. Okay.
When I hear it, I'll know the difference, maybe.
It was,
but yes, satire.
Okay, so it was like a white person, I don't know what age, could have been like a little kid, whatever, and a black person, let's say they're children, and the white person was like, I'm going to climb up there, can you help me? And he's like, first he's standing in his hand, in the black person's hand, and then he's like standing on their back, and like finally gets up. And then the black person says, okay, can you help me up now? And the white person says, well, I got up here myself, why can't you do it? Like, just totally dismissive of, like, any assistance.
Yeah.
Or any assistance that he took.
Yeah. It goes back to,
and I was just like, oh, I definitely think there are some people that have that. And probably myself in the past have had that thought. Like, I grew up in a small town, kind of a poor area. Like, I made it to college or whatever. Like, why can't everyone do the same? And it's just so dismissive of... like the blessings God has given you.
Sin makes us totally blind to what Beverly Tatum, I believe is her name, is an African-American psychologist whose book I read, it's from about 20 years ago, but I read it about 5 or 10 years ago. And she made a distinction between prejudice and racism. And one of the things she said was a lot of white people wouldn't say that they were racist, because I've never personally held down willfully any person of color. She said, however, that's prejudice. Like if you dislike somebody or mistreat somebody because of, ethnicity or something, that would be prejudice. But racism, her definition of it at least, was if I profit from a system that benefits me but hurts other people, and I continue to promote that system and stay in that system, that would be a form of what she would call systemic racism. And I think that was not the first time, but that was the clearest it ever became to me how I have, in certain ways profited in ways that others don't. And my part of my sin in it is I've been okay with that. As long as I'm doing okay. It's kind of like when I tell people, if your pursuit of life is happiness, personal happiness and fulfillment, okay, if there are other people out there who are being oppressed and starving and sick, and they're not doing okay, but you're happy all the time, you know what that makes you? That makes you a sociopath. So the life goal of just personal fulfillment and happiness is a sociopathic goal. We have to be more concerned about the we than the me. So
I think I said it before in this study, and I think I kind of said it jokingly, mainly because I'm embarrassed that I feel this way. And it's not a cognitive, it's just like a sinful instinct. But I said, if I don't get something someone else has, then I think that's unfair. But if I get something that other people don't have, then I think that's like a blessing from God. Or like I did something right.
Or something I just worked hard for.
Yeah. Yep. And it's just so like twisted. You're just so quick. I personally also am so quick to see how someone has slighted me or an injustice against me. Or like, yeah.
Yeah.
I might have to pay more taxes, but like other people don't even have food. So it's just yeah.
It's that sinful impulse.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we're going to see that. So part of, we said Exodus is a literal historical event, but recorded in such a way that it serves as a metaphor for the Christian's journey. And we're going to see that sinful impulse, not only of the Egyptians, which we actually see fewer of, but of God's people, the Israelites. They're grumbling before they get delivered. They're grumbling after they get delivered. No, it doesn't matter where they are. They always think they're being mistreated.
They actually say we had it better off in Egypt.
They're delusional. Yeah, they said we got to eat all sorts of great stuff when we were back in Egypt. They're complaining about not being back at their time in slavery. And this is like seemingly days or weeks or months after they get freed. So it just shows the delusional, like as a Christian, so every human is delusional by sin. I think Christians are the ones that are being honest enough to say, yeah, I can't believe how delusional I am. And when you start talking that way, it actually puts you more in touch with reality. So, yeah, we'll see that thought here. And certainly in the person of Moses, too, that he has a level of delusion. Here, God Almighty is in front of him telling him to do something, and he presumes to list all of his lack of qualifications for it. And it's like, yeah, Moses, this isn't about you. It's about God first, we second, you third. And Moses, it's going to be a lifetime of trying to learn that point. So, should we wrap up Exodus 3? Let's close with a prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for sharing this story of the calling of Moses. Moses is a guy who was, in some ways, incredibly qualified, and then it wasn't until he was totally humbled that he was useful to you in advancing your kingdom. We understand that we need that same humility. We confess that we have a sin that blinds us to how proud and how wicked and how selfish we actually are, Lord, and how destructive that can be towards other human beings. Please open our eyes to all this. Help us just to simply follow your will and your word, to do what we're told, and to trust that when we do so, we fulfill what we were always meant to be and called to be, which is people who glorify you first, serve others second, and advance your kingdom to the glory of your name. Help us do that. In your name we pray. Amen. Thanks again for studying with us. We'll see you tomorrow for episode 97 in Exodus 4.